Now the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call our meeting of March 6, 2021 to order. First order of business is the approval of our minutes for March 9th, 2021. Any comments, additions, or a motion to approve?
Motion to approve. Second.
I have a first and a second. Any further discussion on the minutes? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
4-0. Next order of business, I would request a motion to go into closed session.
Motion to go into closed session. Second.
I have first and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And folks, we'll be back. Thank you.
We're live.
All right. Welcome back, everybody. We're going to begin with Commissioners' reports and comments. Vice President Baker, would you begin, please?
Yep. Good morning. Welcome everybody to our County Commissioner meeting. Hope we have record attendance watching. The only thing that I have is I've had a call this week about our boards and commissions, and when they went online and they were looking for bylaws for each board and commission, and each minute in the minutes, several of them didn't have minutes, and several of them didn't have their bylaws.
They're all posted under our document repository on the website, and if you just want to have anybody call me, I can let them know that. But
Okay,
I
so
can also maybe do some type of a press release or some type of notification.
And if you just send that information to me, I'll forward it back to them.
Sure.
But they said they looked and they just couldn't find anything on.
Send Terry the link to that specific page and he can
Okay.
forward it. Good.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that concludes my announcements.
Commissioner Kiefer?
Yes, just one small request. I was hoping, I know during these next few weeks, we're still without citizen participation and the public not being here. I was hoping that maybe once the Central Committee makes a recommendation or recommendations of who to nominate for our board vacancy, that we would allow that person or those individuals in our meeting room during open session only, not closed session, just so if they are eventually picked and confirmed, they can hit the ground running and just be aware and be witness to what we are, since we aren't open to the public at this time.
Okay. I think, John, you've been talking to me about how to bring the citizens back as we bring everyone back, correct?
So we're looking at that. It's probably going to be in April at some point, but yeah, I mean, I think that's fine. I mean, we have plenty of room for those individuals to come in here and space out, and we are allowing people to come in and make presentations. But I think, whether there's one or a few of those candidates, I think there's room in here to do that. So I think that would be fine. And as we start to get into, we're talking about April, allowing citizens to come back and participate, similar to what you think you did back in the fall. You'd have to sign up ahead of time. We'll have a limited number. They'll be able to come in and talk about issues germane to the county commissioners, and then they can make a presentation.
Okay.
That's where we're thinking, but in the meantime, whenever those people are chosen or if there's candidates, they're welcome to come and sit.
Thank
If
you.
it's okay with the commissioners. I mean,
Yeah,
fine
sure.
for all.
Mr. Kiefer, any other?
That's all.
Yeah, thank you.
How many candidates can the Central Committee recommend?
I think they only have to submit one.
There was 12 applicants.
There's 12. Well, there's 12 applicants.
So,
but
yeah,
I don't know if there's a specific number.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they're even started the interviews yet. I haven't really heard.
I thought there might be a range of candidates that they can forward to the government.
Submit.
Yeah.
I don't think it.
The statute doesn't require.
It doesn't require it. I don't.
Okay.
So it could be one or more.
Could be all of them, couldn't it? Yeah.
I'm just kind of curious.
It could be. I guess if we have 12, we can probably still spread out.
We can do it. Commissioner Kiefer, anything
But
else?
be
sir?
more intentional with it.
Okay. Commissioner Wagner, comments?
Good morning. I don't really have a whole lot of one. I know they swore in new elected officials last night at Williamsport. Appreciated everybody who ran, and congratulations to the candidates who won and were sworn in. That's all I have.
Okay. Thank you. And I do want to acknowledge the folks up in Hancock for the rally they had last Tuesday evening. I want to applaud, thank all four of us commissioners, you three guys showing up. It shows support for our colleagues and our citizens in the western section of Washington County. I also attended the Williamsport swearing in. It was good to be back in my old conference room and looking at the smallest or the closest of government to the people is your community mayor and council. So it was good to be there watching those people take the oath of office. And I do want to acknowledge today Dr. Clobber. Today's his official 3-year anniversary coming to the HCC as being president. He's been a great addition to the community, and I think he's on our agenda later in this meeting, and I think he's listening. So again, Dr. Clobber, welcome, and thanks for all the work you're doing for our college. I believe it was 6 years ago today, Commissioner Bill Weibel was sworn in as Delegate Bill Weibel. He was appointed by late Speaker Bush down in Annapolis on this date in 2015. So I want to acknowledge Mr. Weibel's accomplishments for now being a delegate. And I'd also like to, for the record, acknowledge my sister-in-law, Karen Klein. Today is her birthday, but I'm not going to mention the age, but she was on 3 state championship volleyball teams to give her a little notoriety. So with that being said, that concludes my comments. And next up would be, I guess we have some staff comments next, other than the attorney or
Sarah has some.
Krista, do you have?
Just Susan and Linda.
Okay, and do you?
Deb.
And do you have, okay.
No, I do not.
Good morning, Commissioners. Sarah Greaves, Chief Financial Officer, here to ask your support to join other counties by sending a letter to the state to urge the restoration of veto-driven cuts to the Disparity Grant Program. The Disparity Grant promotes fiscal equity by providing state aid to less affluent counties with proven local income tax effort. House Bill 737 of 2020 altered the enhanced state funding by increasing the minimum grant from 67.5% to 75% of the 2010 grant amount and repealing the termination of the enhanced funding. However, the governor cited budget weaknesses and vetoed the bill and has only included 60% in the budget. The veto was subsequently overridden by the General Assembly. However, the administration is not required to fund the bill, and we may remain at 60%. And so we'd like to send a letter to the state to urge them to increase that to the 75%. At 60%, the county's disparity grant would be approximately $6.7 million, and at 75%, the county's disparity grant would be approximately $8.4 million, with a difference of $1.7 million. So can our office, along with legal, have approval from the commissioners to draft a letter?
Commissioners, you okay with consensus for the letter?
Yeah, I'm
I
good.
assume it would go to the governor and the budget secretary, or?
Yes, Secretary Brinkley?
And this was a request from MACO.
Right,
Okay.
and MACO has written a letter in there in support of this. So really what we're looking for is we're looking for the governor to issue a supplemental budget funding disparity grant.
Okay. Commissioners, okay with the letter?
I'm good.
4 nods. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Okay. Next staff report. Thank you, Sarah. Please introduce yourself.
Deborah Kondo, Deputy Director of Human Resources. Commissioners, I'm here to request approval for a promotion of Mark Bradshaw to the Director of Environmental Management position. That's position number 901.
Motion to approve Mark Bradshaw.
Commissioners, is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we have a first and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Congratulations, Mr. Bradshaw. Deb Condo, what next?
Next, I would like to request approval to hire Logan Beatty for the position of Civil Engineer, position number 179 in engineering.
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Have first and second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Next, I would like to request an upgrade for Monty Triggs to a grade 15, step 7, as previously presented.
Commissioners,
Motion to approve.
is there a second?
Second.
First and second, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Deb.
Is Susan and Linda coming in or not?
Is Susan out there? Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Good morning.
Morning.
Please introduce yourselves in the matter.
Good morning, Commissioners. Susan Small, Director of Business Development.
And Linda Spence, Business Specialist for Washington County Department of Business Development.
We have an update for you regarding the Work Keys program, which if you recall, we adopted with the committee in partnership with several organizations, including HCC and the Chamber of Commerce, among many others, and what is now the Department of Labor. So I'll let Linda proceed since she is the lead in that for our team.
Sure. Thank you for having us. As you may recall, on November 10th of 2019, you approved the reallocation of Appalachian Regional Commission and Hotel Rental Tax Funds to Hagerstown Community College to meet their ARC grant request for job profiling. At the time, the Work Keys team felt that the grant could provide businesses up to $2,500 of the cost of the $3,000 price tag for each position profiled. Now during these unprecedented times with COVID, businesses are struggling to justify the $500 cost for job profiling and are having a lot of difficulty in identifying the right employees to fill their vacant positions. The Work Keys team now has agreed to pay 100% of the job profiling cost on a first-come, first-served basis for Washington County businesses. And as potential employees struggle also to find the $60 for the assessment, the skills assessment, and certification, the team also agreed to pay the 100% of the cost of skills assessment testing. So we feel that both these are a vital benefit to our employers and to potential employees, and we wanted to make sure that you were aware of that.
Will this information be released in a press release or?
We will partner with both our PR departments and then the other partner organizations. We can definitely put together a press release to put it out there. Yep.
Great, thank you. Anything else? Questions?
While you two are both here, if you don't mind me asking, a little over a year ago, it was before COVID hit and struck us, I commented on 2021 being the 100-year anniversary of when, was it Firestone, Edison, and Ford came to Washington County, specifically Camp Harding, I believe it's called, in the Pectonville area, about maybe doing a business symposium or expo, just to highlight, pay homage to that 100-year anniversary mark and all the ingenuity that they brought. With COVID and gatherings, it may not happen this year, obviously. We've kind of had a setback with that, but I'd like to see if our business department could brainstorm maybe with PR to see how we can still honor that 100-year anniversary in a virtual way. I think that would be a good thing to do. Maybe we can partner with the chamber, but
Yep.
I think that's a big milestone we should celebrate.
Yeah, definitely. We can look into that. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
All right,
Folks,
thank
anything?
you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Continuing with staff reports. Kirk, do you have
I don't
anything?
this morning.
Administrator, do you have any?
Thank you, President Klein. Good morning, Commissioners. Just a few things. I just wanted to, I think you probably all have seen this, but the state has announced that the mass vaccination sites at the premium outlets will open on March 25th, 2021. weekend, the state launched a pre-registration website that will allow citizens to pre-register for the mass vaccination site. It really is a pre-registration, and then the state will contact the citizens and allow them to sign up when they're eligible to schedule an appointment. So it's not scheduling appointments, but you can go on that website, register, and then when you become eligible, the state will contact you when you sign up for an appointment at the mass vaccination site. So, as I said, as I say on the website, it's the first step in the process at the mass vaccination site. And the second thing I just wanted to, we talked about this last week, but I just want to remind the citizens that our Board of County Commissioner meeting schedule has changed slightly, that the board will be meeting on March 30th, and there'll be no meeting on April 6th. And the last item, just for the public information, our next item on the agenda, amendments to the retirement plan, will be postponed for this week. So we were pulling that agenda item, and so we'll move right to the 1125 item.
Thank you. Krista, any other staff or yours?
No, sir.
Okay. Next item on the agenda then would be our fiscal year 2022 annual transit grant application. Kevin Cerrone, if you're nearby, you're up. Good morning, everyone. Please introduce yourselves and the matter.
Kevin Cerrone, Washington County Transit Director.
Allison Hartshorn, Grant Manager, Office of Grant Management.
Please begin.
We're here today to seek approval for the resolution authorizing the filing of the application for a grant under the Federal Transit Act and approve the execution of the grant agreement upon receipt, subject to the approval by the County Attorney's Office. Washington County Transit annually applies to the Maryland Department of Transportation, Maryland Transit Administration for federal and state operating and capital grant funding through the annual Transportation Improvement Plan. The grant funds are used to operate authorized transportation programs within Washington County, which includes the Public Transportation Fixed Route Program, the ADA Complementary Paratransit Program, the what is called SSTEP, which is known as a Ride Assist Voucher Program, and our Capital Assistance Program. In fiscal year 22, application requests $2,778,477 in state and federal funds from the MTA and the Federal Transit Administration to subsidize the transit system's current service levels. The Office of Grant Management has reviewed the grant application. There are no unusual conditions or requirements attached to the acceptance of the grant. The fiscal impact for the general fund required to secure the grant funds are as follows. The 5307, which is the fixed route program, $681,684. Capital grant, $361,541. And the SSTEP Ride Assist program, $48,972. In addition, Washington County Department of Social Services contributes $109,000 annually. The Susan Buchanan, Director of the Office of Grant Management, and County Attorney have concurred with the application, and I believe Kurt has the actual document itself.
Yes. Commissioners? Comments? Allison, thoughts? You agree with him?
Yeah.
Okay. There's request for motion to approve the resolution.
Do you have in here the local match? Did you, I'll see where it says a local match.
Mm-hmm.
I see it there. Okay.
Okay. All right.
Motion to approve the submitted application, except wording of funded.
Second.
I have a first and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up on the agenda, authorization to decline acquisition of certain state surplus. Mr. Todd Moser. Moser, please introduce yourself and the topic.
Good morning, Commissioners. Todd Moser, Real Property Administrator. Authorization to decline acquisition of certain state surplus properties. Move to approve the authorization of the Real Property Administrator to decline certain state surplus properties after review with engineering, public works, and planning and zoning departments, and to approve an ordinance granting said authorization. The Maryland Department of Transportation State Highway Administration, MDOT SHA, provides the county 60 days to review state surplus properties, request additional information, and declare interest in purchasing said property for fair market value that has been cleared by the MDOT SHA disposition process. MDOT SHA receives letters of interest from third-party inquirers, often from adjoining property owners regarding remaining state-owned land from prior road and drainage projects. MDOT reviews the land internally and determines if it can proceed to state clearance property status. Once the property has been declared clearance property per MDOT SHA policy and procedures and prior to proceeding with any additional sales activity. The county is given 60-day review period as mentioned above. If the county declines and is determined that the parcel is developable and has access, the state offers the property at public auction. If the property does not have access or is not buildable, the state offers it to adjoining property owners through a sealed bid process. Due to the marked increase in the number of surplus parcels offered by MDOT SHA to the Board of County Commissioners, staff is seeking authorization to decline state surplus properties deemed to be non-beneficial to any future project or unnecessary to serve any other public purpose. This authorization would maximize staff efficiency, expedite the process of placing the properties back on the tax rolls, and relieve undue burden on the board's resources and meetings. Under the proposed ordinance, properties that are deemed beneficial to the county would continue to be presented to the board for approval.
So that's a little confusing to me. So the state has property they don't want.
Correct.
They offer to the county, and you want permission to be able to decline that authorization.
Yeah, normally how it works is a property owner sends notice to the state. It's adjoining property in front of that property owner's residence from an old drainage project. The state does their review process. And then, per their policy, they have to offer it to the county. When it's offered to the county, the majority, everyone I've seen, an adjoining property owner has already shown interest. So we're trying to expedite the process after reviewing the properties and determining it has no use for future county projects.
If a property owner decides to buy it, where's that money go? Is it our property or is it the state?
It's the state's property.
Okay. We're just a broker for the state. Would that be fair?
We just inform the state if we have any interest. That's where
Okay.
that's where it ends at that point. It is state property.
Does this happen a lot?
It's happened 5 or 6 times in the past year. It's getting more frequent.
And who decides if the property would be beneficial to the county for a future project?
I review with Scott Hobbs. I review with planning and zoning and public works. And a lot of this property is off of state roads that we would have no interest. Not all, but the majority.
So the commissioners would be taken out of the process of knowing what properties might be available. So is that right? Like, we would not be part of the process. It's solely up to staff to decide, yeah, that property may have a county use, or no, that property doesn't have a county use.
Only these state surplus properties, remaining properties from prior road and drainage project. For the most part, we're talking about very small parcels, 1/4 acre, 1/2 acre, under an acre. If the state would come to the county offering a large parcel, that's a totally different scenario. These are just state clearance properties.
So the advantage is to the property owner, the citizen who would want to buy it.
So the reason I'm bringing this to advantage, let's remove some of the red tape to the county citizen that wants to buy the adjoining property if the parcel has no benefit to the county. Second, let's get it back on the tax rolls at an expedited process if we have no interest. It's just more red tape, us letting the state know that we are interested or not.
I guess I'm just having a hard time understanding. So, once the state has these surplus properties, the counties are the first to review them.
After the internal state process, the county has a 60-day period to review.
Okay, so that's not gonna change.
Yes, I can give written notice to the state that the county's not interested.
In these
So,
properties.
instead
You
of
have that
taking,
ability now.
I have to bring it to the board.
Oh, okay.
So instead of a 4 or 5 week process, getting it on the agenda, bringing it to the board, I can review everything in 3 or 4 days with the 3 departments I have listed above, and then I can inform the state that the county has no interest in purchasing those state.
So
cruiser
if, just
properties.
hypothetically, if a piece of land, say it's half acre, borders my property and county administrator's property, I guess I have, not a big problem, I like to cut the red tape too, but how do I know that maybe it's not as fair as it should be somewhere down the line? Like, we're giving special interest to me instead of to him because my property borders that too,
You have to bid on it.
Well, so the county's not involved in
the sale of it.
the sale of it, or
Okay.
who gets the property. Every time that I've gotten one of these state clearances property, a third party, the adjoining property owner, has reached out to the state. I don't believe the state and these smaller parcels are reviewing all the property they have. It's being brought to their
So
attention.
we're not offering it to them, the state's doing that.
We are not
Okay.
involved in that whatsoever. It's,
I'd be
it's,
all
it's
right
all
with
the
that.
state.
And as soon as you see the county does not have a need for that piece of property, it goes back to the state so that
They can complete the sale with the
Oh,
property owner.
Is there a way to eliminate the red tape, as you say, but still notify the commissioners of what that property was that would have been available to us? I wonder if that's a decision that should stay with the commissioners, if it's this body's role to kind of set the big picture for the future of the county. And then second question, is it outlined in here what size, if it's a sliver of land versus if it's a 20-acre parcel that might be appropriate for parkland?
Yes, there's no size limit that I have specified in here. I believe that would go back to the review. If I'm going to Public Works and there's a 20-acre parcel, Public Works may say, hey, this could be a use for a park. I think the reason that I brought this, the board, I believe, have given me direction. We're looking to sell property, not necessarily acquire additional property. I thought this fit along those lines, but those are definitely good questions.
I like the idea of efficiency. I just don't know how I feel about that decision being taken from the board. I don't know.
I understand.
Commissioner thoughts?
So if we don't change it, the only thing that benefits, it's less time for you to come through us and it expedites it by a week or two.
Yeah.
I'd say it expedites it 3 or 4 weeks. That's what we're looking at.
Since it's so limited as to the number that you have per year, is this something that could be brought in during staff comment time? You give us ahead of time what the property will be, and it's still discussed in an open manner.
If the board's comfortable with me processing that way, sure, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I think that would be fine.
That's okay with me.
Staff comments are an agenda depending on the time frame.
Yep.
Right, is that what we decided, commissioners?
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. No action taken.
Todd, you can just let us know that, and then we'll know you bring it in staff comments.
I think that's another great idea. Kids understand.
Next on the agenda, request for award, Board of Zoning Appeals, Legal Services, Brandy Noggle. Please come forward, introduce yourself in the matter.
Good morning, everyone. Brandy Nagelbauer in the Purchasing Department. The recommendation I have for you this morning is the request for quotation award Q-21-0693, Board of Zoning Appeals Professional Legal Services. Move to award the contract for the Board of Zoning and Appeals Professional Legal Services to the responsible bidder, I hope I say this right, Kurtica and Associates out of Hagerstown, Maryland, with the lowest lump sum award of $52,500 based on the annual cost contained in their proposal dated February 11th, 2021. The services under this contract will consist of providing professional legal services from an attorney to the support of functioning of the Board of Zoning and Appeals. The contract term is for a 1-year period, tentatively commencing April 18th, 2021, with the option for the county to renew up to 2 consecutive 1-year additional periods. The county does reserve the right to accept or reject any annual renewal request. The county also reserves the right to terminate this contract as long as a 60-day written notice is given to the attorney. This solicitation was advertised on the State of Maryland's eMaryland Marketplace website, the county's website. 16 companies downloaded the document, and we received 2 bids. The funds for these services are budgeted within the department's operating budget.
Just only one question for me. This is strictly a bidding process. Does the zoning board have any input into this, or is it strictly based on dollars and cents?
So they did have input on it, but both vendors that bid on this met all specifications within this bid document. So this basically was a low price bid.
Commissioners, comments, thoughts?
I have a question. Why can't internal, maybe this is more of a question for Kirk or John, why isn't this something that could be handled by our existing county attorneys? Why does this need to be
I figured you'd ask that, and,
Okay.
and we have done that internally for many years. We actually took it out of that cycle some time ago due to a conflict within the county. I don't know if John or Kirk wants to speak of that, but it was internal, but it was taken out of that, and solicitation was started about 3 years ago, I believe.
I mean, this, as a cost savings, I have no idea how much time the attorneys need to work on Board of Zoning Appeals issues, but I wonder if that could be absorbed by our legal staff to have a little bit of cost savings there.
I'm gonna lean on Kirk for this, because I don't really have the answer that you're looking for, but I know it was internal at one point in time.
I mean, I'll be happy to comment on that,
Okay.
and I'll let Kirk speak to it too. So the Board of Zoning Appeals is a separate entity, and they, you know the cases that they hear. If it gets appealed, then the county attorney's office will get involved representing the Board of County Commissioners. So I think the thought was that we needed somebody independent to advise the Board of Zoning Appeals, because the county attorney's office would be involved if it gets appealed later on down the road. So to have them do both, you might even be on separate sides. You might be on different sides. So I think that was why the decision was. I don't know, Kirk, if you want to comment on that anymore, but.
Yeah, I mean, theoretically, there are certain times when the Board of Zoning Appeals may take a position that is contrary to what this board wants to take. I mean, that's happened in some of the recent solar farm cases. And so we think it's best practice that they have separate counsel to write the opinions.
What did we pay for that service last year?
I'm sorry, I don't have that number. I can send it to you, Terry. I can send that to you.
And then,
It was 18,000.
It was probably
A
right around
year,
the same amount.
a year, yeah, for the 3-year
so
period.
it's going from 18 to 54.
No, that's for 3 years.
Yes,
Oh,
it's 3-year, yes.
It's actually
yes.
gone down, right? It's actually less.
It actually went less.
Yes.
Okay.
$500 a year less.
Oh, I see.
Commissioners, comments, thoughts?
How many meetings a year?
How do you know?
Every 2 weeks.
They meet every
Yeah.
2 weeks.
Every 2
Every
weeks.
2 weeks.
Okay. And then they're guaranteed that amount of money, or is that the amount of money that we're guaranteed? What happens if we don't need them?
Well, they're guaranteed that that's annually billed.
They sit in the meetings, right?
Yes, absolutely, every meeting.
Yeah, I think they participate in all the meetings, and of course, they end up writing the opinions, and they give the advice during the meetings, and then I think they write the opinions.
Gotcha.
So they need to be at all the meetings. I think they do. I mean, I think they attend every meeting.
From what I hear, they haven't missed one.
I know Travis, because when I served on animal control, he sat on that board for at least 8 years now, I bet, and they don't get paid anything, and they have to write the opinion. That's quite, and it's quite I know, it's planning and zoning, or zoning board would have to be worse, but, I mean, I sort of see the point that it could get into a mess of the same, our attorneys were doing that, but, and then trying to write opinions or get into a conflict of interest type of thing.
So if there was a case and had to go to court, then that 17.5 is going to grow. That 17.5 only constitutes going to the meetings and writing up the opinions.
Yeah, I don't think, I mean, once it gets appealed, then the Board of County Commissioners would get involved. The Board of Zoning Appeals, I don't believe their attorney has anything to do with the case once it gets appealed. But what's getting appealed is the opinion that was drafted by this attorney. And I think what Kirk was saying is, so the attorney writes the opinion based on the decision of the Board of Zoning Appeals. This board may not agree with that.
So if this attorney has to go to court to represent his, to justify his opinion, we pay him additional for that? Is that all covered?
No, that's not how it works. Generally, it's the parties to the appeal who would be contesting the appeal. It's on the record, so there's really no role for that attorney in the appeal process. Unless the Board of Zoning Appeals were to decide that it wanted to participate directly, right, which it has never done.
Because I just don't know, if they met 26 times, I don't know, how many hours do they need a meeting, Kirk?
It depends on the case, varies depending on how many people testify, what the issues are, how many cases there are.
I mean, how long do the meetings last?
It was midnight at least one time.
Yeah, they start at 7 and go till they're finished.
So they certainly average more than 2 hours a week.
Yeah, I mean.
I'm just doing some quick math.
Yeah.
Commissioners' thoughts, there's a motion to award the contract, a recommended motion.
Motion to approve.
First, is there a second?
I'll second.
First and a second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
4-0, thank you, Brandy.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Kirk.
Next up, fiscal year 2022 personnel request, Debbie Condo, Sarah Greaves.
By the time they put in writing the opinions,
Good morning, Commissioners. Sarah Greaves, Chief Financial Officer.
Deborah Condo, Deputy Director of Human Resources.
We're here to provide to you personnel request recommendations for the fiscal year 22 budget. Each year, requests for new or removal of positions are submitted through the budget process. These requests are reviewed by the Director of HR, the County Administrator, and the CFO, and a recommendation is made to the Board of County Commissioners for your consideration. 10 new positions were requested in the amount of $1,093,650. 6 new positions are being recommended with a fiscal impact of $589,830. The positions that are being recommended include 1 new state's attorney position. This position was eliminated many years ago and actually split between 2 part-time attorneys. Unfortunately, those attorneys are no longer available, and it has proven difficult to attract and retain part-time attorneys. Therefore, the department has requested this position to be reinstated and has removed the part-time budget of $50,000 as a partial offset. 2 positions for the sheriff's office are also being recommended in conjunction with the removal of 2 positions. The positions are for 1 attorney and 1 building maintenance mechanic, and they are offset by the reduction in 2 positions, which are correctional deputy positions, and also include a reduction of $30,000 in contracted services that was an allocation to be available to be used for attorney services. In addition, 1 911 emergency communication specialist position is being recommended. It was eliminated last year to provide a budget for the CAD IT specialist position, with the understanding that it would be requested again in fiscal year '22. Also related to emergency services, not a new position, but an increase in overtime has been requested. This is directly related to the 33 new firefighters, and the amount is $109,300 for overtime. In addition to that, an increase in part-time wages has been requested. $58,140 has been recommended to provide assistance to volunteer fire companies related to staffing shortages. The new public safety training facility is expected to be up and running by spring of next year. There are 2 positions that are being requested for this facility. One is an administrative position, and one is a maintenance lead worker. The total cost in fiscal year '22 is $41,000. However, that only represents the 3 months that they'll be in operation. So the full salary cost would be closer to $170,000 for both positions. Lastly, 2 positions are being recommended for stormwater management, and this is in direct relation to the efforts that need to be made to meet requirements set forth by the NPDES permit. And with that, I'd like to open it to the commissioners for any questions or comments related to the recommendations.
So, from your email, I think, did I read that correctly? Right now, we're 69 and full and part-time employees short, or did I read that wrong?
How many vacancies we have, sir?
Right.
Yes, we have, 69, I believe that's correct.
What-
Vacancies.
How many did you turn down that were requested?
4.
4?
And we also turned down a request from the election board for increased wages related to the minimum wage hike. And the reasoning for that is because the county has not determined a path forward to deal with wages related to that minimum wage. And so we felt like we didn't want to treat one department differently than the rest. So while we do recognize it as a concern, we're not ready at this time to make a recommendation.
You'll include them when we address the issue as a whole.
That's
is what
correct.
You're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
And I think I missed it, or maybe we didn't. Who was on the committee? You, Deb, and?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Sarah, I think you said this, but the proposal for the overtime was $100,000, right?
That's correct.
And the committee's recommending 50, right?
That is actually for the part-time.
Okay,
They did
okay.
request $100,000 for part-time, and the committee only recommending half of that for now. Even though there does seem to be a need due to
Yeah, I
funding
think it-
limitations, we're only recommending half of that. The overtime, I feel, we felt more compelled to fund the request because of the natural overtime
For
that's
the-
caused by the employees.
Right, for the 33, right?
Yes,
Yeah, that's
correct.
right. Thanks for clearing that up.
Thank
Yeah, it was
you.
the part-time, that was
Yes,
part-time, there was a request part-time there for the full-time and then for the part-time too.
that's right.
So some of these are for the new emergency training center.
Yes, sir, 2 positions, 1 administrative position and 1 maintenance lead worker
And
position.
that wouldn't start right away though, right? Or-
It would start in spring. It's anticipated that the completion of that project will be in spring
Okay.
of 2022. And so for fiscal year '22, we have only included 3 months of that salary related to those wages, but we do recognize that will be a need.
Right.
Yeah.
Is there any information out there when we move this training center forward? I thought, and I can't remember exactly, but I thought there was some discussion as to how we weren't going to have to hire a whole bunch of people to man that facility. Is there?
I think I do remember that because we talked a little bit about, maybe it was a year or 2 ago, about people who currently work for the county would move out there, and it wouldn't be necessarily a large increase of staffing. I do think that early on they hadn't recognized the need for a potential administrative position, and then after further review, I believe that's where the maintenance position came into play for the grounds out there. But if you have further questions on that,
I'd just like to possibly see what we discussed when we moved the training center forward with employees. And then I want to see how it's going to, now that it's going to end up with total numbers of them. How many of these positions that are being requested? I know when the sheriff came in here and he wanted an attorney, he figured out a way to hire an attorney for his department and actually be a decrease in cost to the county. Any of these other departments come up with any
Offset.
ways?
Well, the state's attorney position does have the offset of the part-time
I understand that.
wages, so, that's a partial offset. Other than that, there are no offsets, included in these requests.
And you said we had over 60 open positions,
We do.
and there's a savings from that could help pay for these, is that?
Well,
is that
that's
correct?
actually, I would not recommend that because these positions would not be recommended to be included until July 1st. And so those vacancy savings would be attributed to the current fiscal year, not next fiscal year. And you never have a guarantee of vacancy savings. So this would be a direct impact to the budget in the amount of $589,000.
Okay, so back to the sheriff. Why was he denied if he figured out a way to?
No, sir, he is not denied. He's being
Oh.
recommended for both positions that
Oh,
he
I
has
thought-
requested.
Oh, okay. I thought the sheriff's position, or the
I think
attorney's
that was a
position.
mistake, Terry.
Yeah,
Okay.
that was a miscommunication. That was not, it
Okay,
was not denied. All his positions were approved
okay.
or being recommended.
That's correct.
You know, I think I'd be okay because we're back to the training. That's the only thing, the one I didn't even question, I just want, but that's a standalone facility. Would it be safe to assume we're stretching our employees that are already to move down to a standalone building and?
I do think so because it's a training facility, so I think the work that the admin person would be doing is different in nature than the administrative position that they have
Yeah, but
now
they're
out at
maintenance
DES.
workers. Would there be a full-time a maintenance worker to me is what we have in this building.
That's correct. That's what's being recommended.
So it's not a big shot, it's not everybody's big shot, I guess.
It's a maintenance worker, and they'll take care of the grounds.
But the handyman take care of
That's
the
right.
grounds and all that.
They'll take care of the facility, the maintenance, the cleaning, the grounds. I think it'll be a catch-all position for that area out there. And I think that also if there are other emergency services needs in other buildings, that person may be able to be utilized for that as well.
But I'm assuming their main assignment would be that building.
That's right,
And then if we needed to pull them to do something else,
right.
I think.
The original plan was that Director Lewis would oversee the center. That still is the same. He likely will locate there. The administrative person is somebody that could be in the building, open for business, so to speak, answer telephone, greet people, make sure that if there are people coming in that classroom set up, move around classrooms, that kind of stuff. And that is something that we didn't have any discussion prior to that particular use.
Well, I'm just hoping all departments, when they wanna hire somebody, they can either eliminate a position somewhere else along the line that really isn't needed, or they can figure out a way to help offset the cost of the new hire. Again, government can't continue to grow at the rate that we're growing. Just government grows way too fast, in my opinion.
And I'll just say this, I think somebody referenced it, we have had some discussions about whether there might be someone else already employed by county government who could move into, like, the senior's office associate position down there, which means we'd still have to show it here, but if we can identify that, if there's a person who can do that, there could be a savings somewhere else, we haven't identified that yet, so.
Right.
So we're thinking about that there may be a possibility, that means we would obviously fill this position, but then another position may go away.
Right, maybe
I
be
think
able
that's
to
what you're
That's a
replace
good
it.
Well, that's what I
consideration.
So, I mean, we're already thinking about that, so we're starting to look around the county to see if there's someone we could,
Yeah,
we
and
can
I
move
would
down.
still like to see a list of county government employees over the last 5 years, how much we've grown. In numbers, part-time and full-time. Sheer numbers, total numbers.
And would that
Okay, in
include,
total.
and that would also include the positions we left vacant, correct?
Yeah, oh, yeah,
That would.
Positions that are on the
That would
board.
offset them,
Because
yeah.
of,
That would include all
Yeah.
positions,
okay.
whether they were filled or vacant.
You know, I'd be okay with this.
Well, I think this is just for information.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying, yeah.
Sarah,
Yes, sir.
John, Deb, reading your email that you sent to us yesterday evening,
Mm-hmm.
let me just say it was sent at 11:09 p.m. You work around the clock, no doubt. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
I wonder, of those 69 positions that are vacant, we've had a large number of vacancies for quite a while. And I know that helps to create a little cushion and some padding in our budget, to do things like you mentioned, the mid-year raise that we were able to offer. I'm not saying that none of those positions need replaced. I want to be clear about that, but this year, despite COVID, I don't think our staff has skipped a beat for the most part in meeting all the needs of our citizens. We've done a really good job with that. The staff has done a really good job with that. I wonder if there might be an opportunity to look and see the necessity of all those positions. If we were able to do the job as well as we did, might there be an opportunity for some savings and to actually create that savings on the book? I know we save the money when it's budgeted and not filled, but maybe that budgeted money could be used elsewhere instead of just calculated as a potential expense and then at the end of the budget cycle, a savings.
Wouldn't it be fair to say that those vacancies, they've been rotating since I've been a commissioner, so there's always gonna be vacancies. There's always gonna be savings, and I guess my concern would be, with that many vacancies, I don't propose to hire 60 people either.
Well, I would
But
like
with
to,
that many vacancies, we might be taxing certain departments or maybe shortchanging our services.
I will say that a majority of those positions are related to the 33 firefighters that aren't yet on the books. And then I think there were additional 4 positions related to emergency services that were recently approved also. So that makes up about 37 of those positions, just for your information.
Yeah,
So-
I'll just, I'm sorry. I'll just say this, that I think that, I mean, that's part of what we do, and that's part of what I'm trying to do, is to look at those positions and see what is needed. One thing I have discovered, and I appreciate your comments, Commissioner, because one thing I found is that, yeah, our employees haven't missed a beat, and they've been continuing to provide the service. Some positions weren't filled, so people have been doing, sort of double duty in some cases. So, I think some of those positions need to be filled. There may be some that may not be necessary, but some of them are, and our employees have been filling in that gap. So I think that we need to look at each one. So there, and again, there may be.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing.
but,
Before we automatically rehire them or fill those vacancies, we need to review the importance or how, is that what we're?
I think that's
Not
right. and
automatically fill them.
I think that's right, Commissioner. I would piggyback off of what Commissioner Baker said. Some of our departments, as they, like the sheriff, requesting new positions, they're able to take out other FTEs in other areas. The needs of the county where we need people evolve over time, and maybe a position might be obsolete. That's why we haven't had a push to fill it, but we might need a position in another department. I would just like that looked at. Commissioner Wagner's point, absolutely. I mean, we do have several dozen positions vacant at any one time, it seems like. Just with that money being budgeted for potential employees that may never be hired, or we keep them vacant for so long, that's budgeted money that could be either a savings for the taxpayer or used elsewhere more efficiently. Just my thoughts.
All right, Commissioners, any more comments?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up, temporary seasonal part-time wages. Deb Condo, Sarah Greaves, welcome back. Please introduce yourself and the topic.
Thank you, Commissioners. Good morning again. Sarah Greaves, Chief Financial Officer.
Deborah Condo, Deputy Director of Human Resources.
And we do also have with us today Andrew Eshelman, Director of Public Works. He's gonna. We're here to provide to you a request related to hourly pay for temporary and seasonal part-time positions only. The county has recognized the impact of minimum wage on our scale. Please note that the wage scale that was included in the ARF was an older wage scale. That's my fault, and I have provided an updated copy at your desks. It is quite large, so thank you. So without an alternative, the county has removed any steps that fall under the minimum wage to maintain compliance with state regulations. So that's what you see on the scale when you look at it and see certain steps are grayed out. That's what that represents. Unfortunately, this has created a situation where there is very little difference in the starting wages between grade 1 and grade 4. And this has proven problematic because for a lot of our temporary or seasonal positions, this has created an instance where supervisors end up making very, very similar wages to those that they are supervising. We are quickly approaching the hiring season for our pools and camps, which is why Director Eshelman is here. And we would like to request that the commissioners provide temporary authority to the county administrator over the next 12 months to approve for only the temporary or seasonal wages, an equitable wage that is in alignment with our peers in the industry for the work that is being performed. We do recognize that a permanent solution needs to be found, and we need to work towards that. And we're hoping that we can do that once we get a new HR director in place to analyze and review this information with us. So that's our request today.
So you wanted to, and what's in highlighted here, you want to be able to increase or increase the wages, or separate the wages, maybe a better term. But in the same means, minimum wage will dictate an increase in some of the wages.
Minimum wage is dictating the increases, and so, yeah, I think what we're looking for is some flexibility. So if we hire a lifeguard at a certain wage, can we have flexibility and give the county administrator authority to say, okay, well, the supervisor should be making 50 cents more an hour than that person, or something like that?
I'm going to recuse again because I have a family member who's a lifeguard, so I'm out. So
Okay.
Commissioners, to my left.
Thoughts?
So explain this flexibility again.
So I don't think there's a predetermined wage for every single situation that we could come in contact with. But what we do know is that it would be very difficult to hire a supervisor at the same level or just a few cents higher than the people that they're supervising. And so I think based on the county administrator's, discretion and understanding of the positions, that's what we're asking for, to allow him to allow an increase over a step 1, or the lowest step that those positions would generally come in at, because they are, by effect of this scale, out of alignment with what they should be, because we've had to gray out so many steps.
So you're only talking about the possibility of a supervisor, a part-time supervisor? I don't understand supervisor.
I think Andrew can come in and
Yeah, I was gonna say, Andrew can explain why we're here right now, because we do have a bigger issue, but I think I'll let Andrew explain it, that we're trying to advertise for these
Yes,
positions
I
now.
mean,
So-
it's timely because we need to be hiring our part-time and seasonal staff. So the primary positions that fall into that category are our pool staff. So basically, they're seasonal. We need to go out and advertise and bring those
And
folks
don't get
back.
minimum wage.
Yeah, so the way our pay scale is set up right now, it's grayed out at basically minimum wage. So you have a scenario where someone running as a cashier would potentially make the same as the lifeguard, the same as the head lifeguard, the same as the assistant pool manager, because they're all positions that on our county pay scale are set to start below what minimum wage would be. So that's kind of the larger issue to look at, which is our
So how
current
can
pay
they-
scale.
How can they start below minimum wage?
Well, the grade, so if you take a cashier and they're a grade 1, you have to move up until step, what is it?
9.
9 before you get above minimum wage. And so effectively, that's what's happening with position grades 1 through 4. So it's been the general practice that when you hire someone, they start at the entry level wage. And so essentially we're asking for staff discretion, because if we don't do that, we're gonna say, would you like to come work at the pool as a cashier or be our assistant pool manager? They're both $12 an hour.
Right.
And so that creates a real compression issue. So we've crunched the numbers based on what we've seen on an annual basis for those wages. So at least in public works, I can't speak for outside of that. This is something that we can absorb within our existing budgets to kind of rectify this. I mean, in the pool alone, we're going to be looking at hiring a new pool manager, someone who's been here 20 years. So like the savings alone from that will cover these basically 50-cent or dollar at most incremental changes. So that's kind of the overall plan, and it's a stopgap measure to get us to where we ultimately need a different solution, because what we're facing is, if this continues on by 2025, when the minimum wage goes to 15, that essentially all the steps, or all the grades up to grade 6 would effectively have the same starting rate.
So what's the dollar amount that you're looking
In
at?
public works, it would be 25,000, and that would cover basically our park attendants, pool staff, summer rec camp counselors. And so we can absorb that this year within our part-time wage scale.
And what I would say too, to add on to that, is that I think HR can also track any deviations that are made related to this issue, so that we do have that in place to report on and use as we move forward. I think this is truly just a temporary solution to a bigger problem that we have that we're trying to tackle.
So then what effect does this have on full-time employees?
This would have no impact on full-time employees. It would only be related to the part-time and seasonal. A lot of our full-time employees' starting wage is above the grade 1 through 4, so it really impacts the seasonal.
So I know this is related to the minimum wage, like, do we have situations throughout the county where supervisor may make less or the same as an employee they supervise?
Yeah, that
Yes.
does happen sometimes, and it's because some people have a longer tenure with the county. I have examples of that in my own department, and so it is a countywide. It does happen. It's a countywide occurrence. I think that is correct.
I would be inclined to support this. It's a trial for 1 year, it sounds like.
Okay.
And I would say, so long as you stay within your budget and no additional money, you have budget savings from, I guess, staff turnover, it sounds like. So if it's not creating a financial burden on the county more so than what it is now, I'd give the administrator the discretion to do that.
Okay, would you consider our motion
I would
then?
make the motion.
And that's for 1 year?
Yes, for a
Yes,
12-month period. Yes, sir.
Is there a
So
second
next
to
year,
that?
if there was,
We're hoping next year we have a more permanent solution for the entire scale in a broader context to a better
Okay.
solution.
We made a motion, is there a second?
second?
First and second, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. And I can assure you that I will seek the guidance of these three here, and anyone else, before we make that decision.
All right,
And that will allow us to start advertising for, once we decide what
Yes,
it's gonna
which-
be, we can start advertising for our part-time and seasonal people for the summer, which we need to do
Yes, thank you very much.
Last month, yes.
last month, but we're gonna do it now, so we'll be ready to go.
Thank you.
okay, next agenda item, fiscal year 2022 Highway Department budget, and
And
Andrew
Andrew, thank you
Eichmann.
for
and Zane
not
Rhodes.
adding to the county budget. Thank you.
Try.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, please introduce yourself and the topic.
Guess it's good afternoon, Commissioners. Andrew Eshelman, Director of Public Works.
Zane Rao, Deputy Director of Highways.
We're here before you for informational purposes to present an overview of the FY22 highway budget. The Washington County Highway Department is responsible for the maintenance of the county's road system. This includes, but not limited to, patching, resurfacing, stabilization of dirt roads, keeping ditch lines clear of debris, mowing along county right-of-ways, management of stormwater ponds, snow and ice removal, line striping, signal and sign maintenance, and our fleet department provides maintenance services for county-owned vehicles. The highway budget increased over FY21 by $140,000, which is 1.2%. The increase is mainly a result of the proposed step and COLA adjustments. The general fund contribution to the highway fund has increased by about $211,000 to account for the wage increase, and also to supplant the reduction in highway user revenue. So we have talked a lot about highway user revenue in the last 13 years for the members who've been on this board for a while. But it goes without saying that represents tens of millions of dollars in cost shifting from the state to the county. So while there's been some small gains made at restoring funds since 2009, they do pale in comparison to the approximately $9 million annually we once received. In the past 2 years due to COVID, FY20 and 21, we saw a nearly $500,000 reduction. And for FY22, we are anticipating lower funding than even pre-COVID levels. So for FY22, for that state funding source, we're set to receive approximately $1.86 million, which is about $125,000 less than budgeted.
And at one time, we were receiving $9
million, yes.
And that comes from the tax on gasoline, correct?
That's one of the sources. So it is collected from motor fuel tax. So the state has 36 cents on every gallon that you pay at the pump goes to fuel taxes. There's titling taxes, there's operating revenues for the port, airport, transit, and then there's corporate income tax. So that's collected state level, and then they allocate that. So as I mentioned, there's been a decrease coming to the county, but on a global scale at the state level, there's been a decrease because as vehicles become more fuel efficient, there's less collected. And then rather than keeping up with the percent that has been given to the counties, the state has more or less decreased the county share from 15% down to 3%, while their percentage has gone from 70 up to 86%. So that's been a major cost shift. And as I said, this is a tax that we all pay. It's evenly collected across the state, yet I would say by any reasonable metric that could be used to allocate funds, the counties end up on the short end. There aren't any provisions at the local level for governments to collect gasoline or vehicle taxes. So as a result, the county general fund needs to step up and continue to cover that widening shortfall. So that's just a little bit of background of what we've been seeing on one of those major funding sources for the highway department. But as far as going through the actual budget on the expense side, I think we've taken a pretty thorough look at our operation and expenses, and we'll go over some of those in a little bit more detail. The highway department operation is divided into several different areas. We have general operations, road maintenance, snow removal, storm damage, traffic control, and fleet management. So overall, the majority of the proposed increases do come from wages, and that's been partially offset as we've had some retirements and have been bringing new employees in at the beginning, the lower end of the scale. So for some other minor adjustments, we look to offset those increases in areas of the budget that may not be as high a priority for this year. For the general operations account, that's the area that handles the administrative overhead, the insurance, utilities, and office expenses. And so we're looking at $1.3 million there, which is a 1% increase. The road maintenance account is where the bulk of the employee costs are and material expenses that cover the road maintenance work, including employee wages, asphalt patching, pipe replacement, tree trimming, and that is $5.9 million or 1.89%. And I'll let Zane explain some of the other areas of our budget.
Snow removal and storm damage obviously is affected by Mother Nature. Last year for storm damage was almost a non-event, and for snow removal. This year, not so lucky with the snow removal. We're still doing good material-wise, but I think we're around 1.4 total for snow removal this year. Traffic control went up a little bit. We put more material in for contracted services. We're finding when you're tarring and chipping more roads, the paint is not holding up as long due to, chips being plowed off or just regular traffic kicking off, so we're painting a more frequent timeline. Fleet management, this year's a big year for us. We're gonna be starting our 6th 5-year equipment lease for backhoes, loaders, and what that does, it allows us reliable, dependable equipment, not only for maintenance, but during storm events, be it in the summer, be it in the winter, snow removal. Typically, we're not seeing the equipment sitting in the shop broke down, other than regular maintenance. On those 5-year leases, we have a 5-year, 5,000-hour warranty. We've reduced that warranty to 2,500 hours. Typically, we don't reach that threshold, so we save some money there. But that is a big one for this year. Like I say, it'd be our 6th 5-year lease. So, and that would start July 1.
Are there any questions we can answer?
Yeah,
So your budget's going to grow by $140,450 or 1.2%.
Correct.
Okay. And what was the dollar amount for the pay increases?
So,
On the bottom of 20-1,
Okay.
the salaries and benefits increased by $140,000.
There you go. Nice.
with the increase of gas and oil, how's that affect your budget for projection on fuel and?
I think Sarah and her staff uses it Opus to try to forecast the,
We use a lot of sources. We use calculators, but we did try to forecast the gas, and it did go up, I believe, a quarter.
Yeah, it does go up, and the other thing to point out, if you look at the expense and the revenue, particularly on the fleet management side, because we're kind of a pass-through for a lot of counties, so when you look at the gas expenses, that ends up getting reimbursed by other county departments who are filling up. So we don't necessarily have control over that on our end necessarily for how much other departments may be filling up. And I know even during the budget process, we saw the recommended number for the gas increase, because if everyone's, been watching it, it's gone from, around $2 up to $2.75 right now. So that can have a big swing when we're talking about $500,000 being budgeted for just diesel fuel and gas. So they do try to work together to do our best to estimate that, but.
So Sarah, when you estimated a quarter, was that a quarter, 25 cents per gallon, or a quarter in a cost increase?
It was a quarter increase over last year. We have each gallon for auto gasoline projected at $2.75 a gallon for fiscal year '22. And keep in mind,
Good
we
luck.
do get a lower rate than what we see at the top.
You may address this on fleet replacement, your plow trucks.
yes.
How many approximately do we have?
We
Yeah.
have approximately 40 dump trucks.
In the life of them, a recommended replacement due to maintenance, erosion, all that, what would,
I believe
What-
the county's policy policy is 10-year replacement.
okay, that's,
Now, we've got probably 8 to 10 at least trucks that are still between 2001, 2004 in that range.
I guess what my point is it better to do a regular replacement program than continue to do maintenance and repair? And that's, I guess that depends per vehicle, and you make that decision on your fleet replacement, is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's programmed out. That's probably the largest single vehicle that we have, but then we also, have graders, well, I guess they're leased, but pavers, and there's other smaller, equipment that we need to buy, which goes in under the capital expense. Under the operating side, which Zane touched on, is a lot of specialty equipment that we need, because we're covering everything from road maintenance to tree trimming. And so it makes sense to lease those things out, because we're not necessarily like a excavation contract where they're putting 8 hours a day on that equipment. We're using it because we need it. If we're running, you know, an operation down in Keedysville, we can't be running a loader down there every time somebody needs to scoop up, you know, some stone. So it works out, I think, both ways for us in terms of the reliability and the trade-in value that we get at the end of the lease.
Yeah, when we lease this equipment, we have a guaranteed buyback. We can either accept that, we can keep the equipment, or we can keep it and sell it ourselves. So for this year, the buyback's 45% of the new cost for the backhoes, and it's 51% for the loaders. So we're recouping or holding on to some of that value to keep rolling into the new equipment, which allows us.
Okay, I just want to make sure there was a plan or something devised.
Yes.
That. Very good. Commissioners, other comments?
Thank you.
Thank you. Nothing else? Thank you,
Good
gentlemen.
job.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank Alicia Heil and Jack Rayner, our staff at Highway, for their help, and Sarah and her staff for help with the budget. Everybody was a big help.
Thank you. Very nice.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, appreciate it. Next agenda item, we'll be hearing general fund budget presentation, Hagerstown Community College, Dr. Klauber. And I believe he's joining us virtual.
He is going to join us virtually.
Gentlemen, thank you there.
You were there, now I've lost you.
There he is.
Dr. Klauber, welcome.
We see
Thank
you.
you, guys.
Oh,
Good, can you hear me?
Sure.
we can hear you.
We can hear you.
Please introduce yourself
Fantastic.
and the topic.
Great, well, listen, it's a pleasure to be here. I really appreciate you accommodating me. My children are on spring break, and we're not in Hagerstown this week. So I just want to also tell you, Commissioner Klein called me this morning, congratulated me on 3 years at HCC, and I tell you, it feels like it was just yesterday that I was hired. We love Washington County, and it's just such a great place for us and for our family, and we really do enjoy being there, and we appreciate all the work that you do as well. I had two commissioners that were going to join, my board members that were going to join me today, but they had to get called off to a foundation board meeting, and they regret that, but they did want me to tell you that they like meetings in person better at the college because that's when the board members get fed crab cakes. So hopefully next year we'll be back to complete normal and you'll be on our campus once again.
Thank you.
I'm going to be very brief with you, members of the commission. I will tell you, we're not going to ask for any increase in our operational appropriation this year. I think that, we're fine where we are. I'm not planning on raising tuition at all this year either, so I think we're going to be okay, and so that's good. Did want to also mention, I think on the capital side, we've got a request in for $500,000 to finish our Center for Business and Entrepreneurial Studies, and also a $608,000 request for the LRC roof replacement. Both those items were in the 10-year plan, so there's nothing new there, and that is my request, and I'm here to answer any questions that you may have.
Dr. Klauber, it's Randy. I think you've done a wonderful job, and not only have I want to give the public a tidbit about you. Not only do you do great service at HCC, but everybody loves animals. You fly Pets for Paws, which are transporting animals in your airplane to give them better homes. So I wanted to also thank you for that.
You bet. Well, thank you. It's my one charity hobby that I do outside of work for the foundation at the college, and I really do enjoy it. My kids enjoy it, and we love taking animals that basically are slated for euthanasia in many of these shelters down south, and we bring them up into the mid-Atlantic states or up into the Northeast where they're going to be adopted and get forever homes. And so it's a big pleasure and a lot of fun.
Great cause.
Commissioner Kiefer, any comments? Anyone else?
Yeah, Dr. Klauber, again, congratulations on your 3 years. Time sure does fly, and it doesn't seem like that. Big shout out and kudos to you and your board for how you've managed the college during uncertain times. I think it's amazing that you have come to us with a no budget increase. That says a lot about how you manage your finances at the college and how the board manages the finances as well. I ran into one of your board members during a breakfast meeting this morning, and just a shout out to all of you for the good job that you do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Dr. Clover? Hearing none, thank you for being here today, no matter where you're at, virtually or in presence, and we look forward to next year. Thank
Bet.
you.
Thank you.
Good day
Thank
to
you.
you.
Thank you, Dr. Glover.
Thank you.
Next agenda item, fiscal year 2022 general fund budget, proposed draft 2. Sarah, please introduce yourself and any staff you may have with you.
Thank you, Commissioners. Sarah Greaves, Chief Financial Officer. I have with me today Kim Edlin, the Director of Budget and Finance. Before I start into the budget discussion, I did just want to follow up on a couple items. Last week, the board asked what $2 million would do basically for the pension ratio, and I had a chance to take a look at that. So $2 million, all else being held equal, would increase our funded ratio by about 1%. Also, I did talk about this a little bit before, earlier today related to the disparity grant, but Commissioner Kiefer asked me what the lowest amount that we would receive would be, and that amount is $6,689,000. And the highest amount that we could receive would be $8,361,000. So I did want to go over that. Currently, this current version of the budget has the same disparity grant that we received for fiscal year 21, or that we expect to receive. It's $7.8 million. So we're gonna have to make some adjustments. We may want to reduce that to the 6.8 to represent the lowest amount. You know, we can talk about that today as well. We also spoke about, kind of related to the pension discussion, options for one-time funding that was available. So obviously, I would recommend contributing an additional amount to our pension. We are 53% funded, or we were at the end of 2020, so that's something to consider. Another option would be Board of Education capital funding. The Kerwin Commission, I believe, allocates additional capital funding to the Board of Education, but they do still require a match. And I believe their early estimate on that additional funding was around $25 million. So a county match for the construction, I believe, is at 21%, but then of course, if there are ever additional schools being built, the state does not pay for some of those items like utilities and furniture, and they can also add up. So that would be a potential use for one-time funding. And then another potential use would be for outside agencies. I do believe some of our agencies, I am aware of some of them that have one-time items that they're looking to purchase. We have held outside agencies flat in the last couple years due to funding limitations. And for fiscal year 22, we are moving forward in a conservative manner because, you know what, we're not sure what's going to happen at the state level related to cost shifts or cuts to local governments. And so that may be something to consider as well. Lastly, before I get into the budget, we also spoke about potentially allocating additional funding to COF, community organization funding, or distributing funding to organizations that were not recommended by the committee. As you know, the COF grant program was established in 2011 to ensure the distribution of county general funds and that they were distributed in an equitable fashion based on need and measurable outcomes provided to the community by our local nonprofit organizations. The applications are then ranked and scored, and decisions are made regarding the funding. After reviewing this process, I would come to you and advise against doing an across-the-board allocation to these organizations. This process could, or the act of doing that could create some inequity and compromise the integrity of the program, but providing funding in a different way, leaving the COF funding alone, may be a better option for the board to consider. Are there any questions with any of those items before I get into the budget?
I thought on the $100,000, I thought that was just like an amount that we threw out there.
If the board would like to
And we
allocate,
wanted to just have the grants department look at some of those agencies that didn't receive, because if I remember, she said when they scored everybody, the points were just so close to each. Everybody was really close. So I guess for me, I was wondering if some of those agencies that didn't receive, were they really, really close and they didn't, and I don't know how the scoring goes, if they were a tenth of a point off.
yeah,
I thought we were gonna see some numbers
I do
based on
understand.
recommendations for that.
Okay, I do understand that, and I can provide some scenarios for that. Something to consider, though, is some of the organizations that scored really high may not have been awarded 100% of their requests. They may have been awarded 50% or 30% or 15%. And so the organizations that scored lower or did not make the cut, so to say, for the funding, how are you going to equitably increase those organizations? Would you take the lowest amount funded to those that are recommended and distribute that percentage? So for instance, the committee recommended funding an organization and they funded it at 17% of their request. So to increase other requests that were not recommended over and above that 17% would create some inequity. So I think there are other factors to consider when we think about the COF funding as a whole. One thing I would suggest, if the commissioners wanted to allocate more funding, maybe to rely on the COF committee to disperse additional funding and use their recommendations, if you wanted to go that route.
That's what I thought. I thought they were gonna come back with some recommendations as to what they would be comfortable funding the agencies that didn't receive. What would they be interested or comfortable funding them at what level? I thought that's what,
Okay.
I thought we not necessarily going to spend $100,000, but we wanted to use
It
that
may be
$100,000.
complicated because it's a board, it's a volunteer committee, and so having some very specific direction would be good for them, because it does take a lot of time for them to come together to do something like that.
And I thought it was for one time. I didn't.
Okay, so what
I
would
guess
the board?
Let me interrupt,
Mhm.
pardon me, may I add? I think maybe we were talking about considering adding extra money to that grant program for the long run. And shortly, maybe we were going to allocate some temporary money for that group of 5 to maybe review all the situations and applicants and maybe to adjust any allotment or award. Is that what we were
That's what I thought.
kind of thinking? And let the 5 members, because we're all commissioner appointees, so maybe if the
I
commissioners.
kind of thought along this, it was kind of a double look as well, something for the future, but also I think the request came, initially I was asking for more funding for the Commission on Aging, a service
Yes.
I feel, very strong about. And I think it was Randy who made a proposal later in the meeting about a way to maybe fund some other organizations within that group. But it was also with the understanding that some of those requests may not even qualify. For
Yeah,
example, if it's a
so-
capital project request, it won't qualify for COF standards.
Yeah, I agree, and I think I'd take it along the same lines as what Terry suggested is, okay, task the committee to meet one more time with X amount of dollars, or their recommendation, if they could fund any more,
Where would they put it?
where would they put it? I know some of the decisions had to be based on CARES Act money. Somebody got a whole bunch and somebody didn't. So I'm sure that's the kind of stuff. See, that's the problem. It's hard to judge that until you were sitting in their seats. So I would say, okay, if you had an option to come back and fund some of these and make it sort of fair, how much would it cost? They could do that in one meeting, or?
Susan, do you want to come and speak about this?
Sure. Susan, come forward and introduce yourself, please.
So what we want to do is we're offering you $100,000,
an offer I can't refuse.
Well, 50 would be better, but.
Yeah, up to.
I would be glad to reach out to the committee. I did check the bylaws to ensure there weren't any restrictions on how many times they meet, certain times. They do have the ability to have special meetings. I would have to give them proper notice and such, but we could do that. It would be important that I would have a clear guideline to give them, to charge them. You have a specific amount of funds and what the directions, if, you know, they are to do, or they are to look at it as if they were back at their original time and they just had that extra amount and allocate as they would, or do you want them to focus on those that may not have received
I
funding?
think just on the ones that didn't get anything.
Okay.
That's my opinion.
Okay.
Is that okay, gentlemen? What do you think of that? One-time infusion of X amount of money, let the committee review,
What's the
and
amount?
they make the recommendations. What dollar amount we asking to maybe to throw in? Susan? Sarah?
Well, it's kind of difficult because if you only focus on the organizations that were not funded at all, it kind of goes back into the conversation that I brought up earlier about the
Right.
equity.
Well,
And
maybe
so
the-
that's on my
Maybe the
mind.
committee
Yeah.
should look at overall and then.
I think
allow
that
them
is
to
the
use
better
it.
approach.
Yeah,
And
they
then
have the
there's-
requested amount, and just go with an average of what other people got funded, and
Well, then there's categories which have certain percentage.
There are,
Right.
and there's
that makes it,
ranking.
how do we
Categories.
break up the
Certain
100,000 to the categories? It becomes.
That's right.
I
mean,
wouldn't
there's
want,
certain-
I wouldn't want to give amount of money that would cause the ones that had
Right.
not
Ranked
given
higher.
any money because of their
But if this
score
person got
more than
30%,
those that
if
had
this
score.
person got 20%, you could sort of average and get a good idea.
Okay.
But I guess what I think she's saying too
we have
is,
too much-
let's say an organization that was recommended by the committee got 20%, and then this new pot of money, because it's restricted to
gotcha.
those
Yes.
without being recommended, their percentage would be higher than those originally recommended by the committee, and so
Right.
having that additional money may have changed the
Right.
committee's decisions.
Because you have you have several different groups. You have some who may have got fully funded, and then you have some that got partially funded.
That's right.
And then you get some that didn't get any, and some that may not
And-
qualify at all, no matter what you
And
do.
the categories had
And the
X
different
amount of
categories.
money in, correct?
Right, we have to look at, the rules that the committee
there's
does
where
have
the
is
quandary
based
comes
upon,
in.
there's a certain amount in each category. They can
Yes.
only move 20%.
Right,
So
that's
I don't know if we want to look at actually, if you want to allocate additional funds, maybe.
Per category?
Have it per category. That is something to look at as
Right.
well.
And
Maybe-
there's four categories or five?
As far as, there was a couple categories that there were no zero recommendations, so you wouldn't need to do anything there, but the
Yeah, I
families
think
and
that's- I
children,
think the ones that didn't receive
Yeah.
any money are the ones that,
seniors.
if they're, yeah.
Okay.
So the
But without seeing the
seniors-
application, you don't know why they didn't receive money, correct?
For
The
each,
committee-
there's a reason for every organization, I mean, every applicant, every ask. You have 5 individuals on the committee, so they're all going to have maybe different reasons for different requests, and some people may have different opinions that
So
becomes a
our first step,
consensus.
you see the willingness of the commissioners trying to help some during this COVID time. I think that's what
Yep.
everybody here believes, that these groups, some need help. Do you recommend we name a dollar amount and send this money back to the committee with general instructions or specific instructions?
I'd say
to
they
review?
know better than we do, Jeff, let them.
Well, that's, let the committee decide.
I think a dollar amount would be good.
I think a dollar amount not to exceed,
It's a
perhaps.
starting point, yes.
And then,
Commissioner's idea for a starting
I,
point?
I would add, you know, I know originally we have a funding breakdown as to what each organization, what category they belong to, would receive. But I'm looking at arts and culture, it was each request was fully funded. So I don't think arts and culture need to be a priority of this additional funding. I mean, is that in keeping with what
From
we're
what-
saying
that's-
maybe?
from what I understand, we were to, the committee was to focus on the ones, yeah.
Right, so, but under the category for arts and cultures, they were talking earlier about, the breakdown and allocation of to
Oh, I
different,
gotcha.
you know, categories of the businesses. For example, arts and cultures was funded, each request was funded in full, and it
Right.
met that category percentage. So I don't think that's an important thing to look at.
Right, so then the
Right.
committee would take the potential funding available and not include
Yes.
that because they were already
And,
funded.
look at those businesses, or, not businesses, organizations that did not receive any funding at all. Do they qualify? You know, on the surface, does their request qualify for funding from this
Would they have received if there was more money?
Right. Just, I want to recap what I'm hearing to make sure I give the proper instruction to the committee. That we're going to have them focus on the organizations who were not funded with additional funding at amount to be determined up to. Also charging them to look at it to ensure that it's equitable to those who may have scored higher. So even if they may have enough money
I get it, yeah.
that they could give more, but they want to keep that percentage so
Keep it
that it's
fair,
fair
yeah,
to
yeah.
everybody, but that every organization does get some consideration of funding for eligible
Okay, Commissioners,
requests.
you okay with that?
You just need a dollar amount.
Right.
100,000, that's what I heard floated around.
Yeah, it was up to.
Is that all right to start on that?
Well, and finish.
Yeah,
All right,
up to,
Up to.
Yeah.
Would I need a motion for that, or is just a consensus to move forward with that suggestion?
I think a consensus is good, yeah.
Legal, anybody?
I do a motion.
Oh, defer.
Okay, let's
why I'm
propose
not legal.
a motion to fund it up to 1,000 with the instructions that we provided Susan. Is there a motion for that?
I'd motion to approve up to $100,000 to be determined by the COF committee for additional funding to the organizations that did not receive any funding.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, thank you very much, good job.
Thank you.
All right, please continue.
Okay. Commissioners, attached to your ARF is a packet with revenue and expenditure information. The first couple pages are just the numbers, and then behind that you'll see that there are some nice graphs and charts, and that's the information I'm going to use to go over today. So the first, it's the third page in. It says at the top, summary of general fund revenue categories. And this is a high-level summary, and then those categories get broken down, which I'm going to go over in more detail. So I'd like you to turn the page. And the top says general tax revenues, fiscal year 22. And you can see the change of 15.2 million as the total. So of this 15.2 million, the real estate tax estimate, the real estate taxes increased by 1.9 million. And that's based on property assessments from the state of Maryland, which does include an increase in the assessable base. This increase was offset by a reduction in revenue due to the projected increase in commercial assessment appeals. The next category is income tax, and this budget increased by 12.9 million, and that's based on current and prior year revenues, adjusted for anomalies, and includes an assumed disparity grant of 7.8 million. As we discussed previously, we may want to reduce that disparity grant for the time being to 6.8 million until that House bill gives us assurance that we would be receiving the additional $1.7 million in revenue.
So you're saying half that money comes from the disparity grant, and it'll fluctuate depending on what the governor's amended budget would be? Is that what you're saying?
It will fluctuate based on if that House bill passes. If it does not pass, the lowest we would receive is the 6.8. So we would reduce it by about $1 million if we made that adjustment, which would impact the amount that remained for one-time capital costs or contributions to pension. Does that make sense? Other than that, recordation tax increased based on current trends. But that was offset by a decrease in trailer tax due to new enabling legislation that allows the tax to be based more on assessed value rather than the methodology we had been using. If there are no questions on general tax revenue, I'll move on to the next page, which is charges for services. Charges for services decreased by $357,000, mainly due to the Public Safety Cost Center. Revenue expected from speed cameras decreased to 1.3 million based on the amount of citations currently being issued. There are fees that go against this 1.3 million in the amount of 800,000. So the net revenue is approximately 500,000. In addition to that, recreational program fees were reduced by 40,000 due to lower participation and based on prior year actual. And in the permitting, construction, engineering departments, plumbing licenses fees were expected to increase in fiscal year 22 due to it being a renewal year, and that would contribute an additional $17,000. If you turn to the next page, the last category for revenues is grants for operations with a $2.7 million increase. And this is directly related to the SAFER grant that was secured to provide for wage and benefit reimbursement for the 33 firefighters. The next section we have is the expenditures, and all the detail is there in the front 2 pages, but if you flip to the graphs, you'll see at the top the summary overview of general fund expenditures. If you look to the right side, you see the proposed change. Total is 17.6 million. I'd like to just take a second. The major components of that 17.6 million reside in the Department for Emergency Services at a 4.1 million increase. The capital category, which is $5.4 million increase. And then at the bottom, the other category, which is $5 million. It's really important to note that that other category includes the one-time funding that we had been discussing before. It's approximately $4 million in this budget version. It could be reduced to $3 million without the additional disparity grant, or it could increase slightly if we do get the, if that House bill does move forward. So that's something to note, that it's included in the other category under general operations. Currently, it's sitting in the pension line item, but it can be easily moved or transferred wherever the board would like. So if you move the page, this overview of general fund expenditures lists every category and a high-level explanation, but just like the revenues, I'm going to skip this page and go to the detail. So the first section that you should have is education expenses at the top, fiscal year 22 education expenses. The Board of Education is being provided $1,019,000 more than maintenance of effort. This was in response to the hold harmless legislation that we heard about during their presentation. As we know, HCC did not request any change in funding.
Okay, back to education. So you're talking
sir.
about the 1 million, or yeah, the 1,019,000 more.
Yes, it's a total of $103,208,110 is being proposed, and that's $1 million more than maintenance of effort, than the calculation. So the commissioners, if you only provided
So
them,
what did we provide in funding last year?
we provided the same amount, less $10. The hold harmless funding from the state required counties to provide more funding than in fiscal year 21 to secure the hold harmless funding at the state level. And that's what we tried to do.
$9 million
here.
to, what is it?
Yes, I think it was approximately $9 million.
If we agree to that, then they're eligible for $9 million from the state. If we don't, they're not eligible.
It was a substantial amount, and there's legislation that was introduced to hold the county harmless in providing this additional funding over maintenance of effort to the Board of Ed, so that it's not included in our per pupil allocation next year for fiscal year 23 budget. So that's good news.
So when they did their budget presentation, did they specifically state that the state was going to provide $9 million more, or was it less that they were?
The state's not providing them $9 million more than the state provided them last year. The state is only holding them harmless, and that's where the $9 million, I believe, comes from, because in total, I think the state is providing them less money, actually, because they're not funding their pre-K program in total as they had in the previous year. So they actually are facing a cut from the state, but a large chunk of that money is the hold harmless.
So that $9 million actually only, I don't want to say that. So based on what they received last year, what they should receive this year based on maintenance of effort, they're going to hold them at the same levels they held them at last year. And
they're
if
requesting
they weren't to do
counties.
that, they'd have a $9 million reduction.
Yes, that is what I'm understanding.
Okay.
But they're
Yes.
eligible for that because we're funding them at the level as
I
proposed.
understand that.
That's right.
Right.
Correct.
And the state has put that requirement in to say, hey, we'll do this if the counties agree to do this.
Right.
And what were they originally asking from the county? They were asking for.
They're asking for $110.7 million. And you can see that in the top line under the request.
And we're gonna be providing,
It was a $7.5 million increase that they requested,
okay, so, and you're recommending how much we provide to them?
the same as last year plus $10, which is
Okay,
$103.2 million.
Okay.
I think part of their, the difference there, that $7 million was, I think it's a $1.8 million less that they're getting from the
Yeah, I
state, because they're
understand.
not funding the pre-K program, so. I
That
think
sounds
that's what
right.
they told us last. And of course, it's all based on per pupil amount, so.
Right. Which they definitely had a reduction in their number of pupils.
That's what, right, that's why when you said it's above maintenance of effort, that's for this year, so.
That's right.
That's how we got to that 103 million.
Yeah, you take the,
The 102 million, it's 100, I don't know what the exact number is.
the maintenance of effort number is 102.2 million.
Right.
And we're providing 103.2 million in this budget.
But basically just so they can get the grant, story over, right?
That's correct.
And Sarah, did you say the hold harmless legislation covers?
The hold harmless from the state is only for fiscal year '22, but what it does for us as county is there's legislation that holds the county harmless for the '23 maintenance of effort calculation, so that this $1 million in additional appropriation will not be then allocated into the per pupil calculation. So we'll be held harmless for that.
So what they're really doing, the way it's written right now, is they're just sort of gonna overlook this year.
That's right. They'll
So-
skip it.
Right, they'll skip it this year, so whatever number counties give this year, it will just be skipped, and so when we look at maintenance of effort for next year, it'll be based on previous years.
Now, I was in a MACO meeting, and they were discussing any additional over the hold harmless amount, which would be more than last year. And they were discussing whether, if counties decided to appropriate those funds, if they would be included in the FY23 calculation, and it was undetermined at that time. So we may need to find out more information if that's something that the board decides to consider. But
Right, well,
this, we know, is a held harmless amount.
Right, well, that's why I think that, that is a question, if the board would decide to give additional monies. But I think, again, the way it's written right now, or at least the way it was written a few days ago, I don't know if there's been any changes, that they would just basically, like I said, skip this year. So
Okay.
almost no matter what amount we would give, as long as we reach that minimum amount,
Okay.
it wouldn't be held against us. But there could be changes to that, because I think some people were talking about whether that's gonna be changed. So we're gonna monitor that. But right now, the answer is correct, is the 103 million plus $10 gets them, so the state will fund them as they promised,
Yes.
if the county gives more than they gave last year.
Yes.
And I do understand their argument. If you're, if maintenance of level amounts stay consistent, every year it costs a little more to educate a kid. So if those amounts do stay the
Yeah.
same,
I would like some clarification on that. I do remember Dr. Michael making that statement, but each year the per pupil amount does increase because of the maintenance of effort. So the per pupil amount is subject to an escalator of 2.5% for our county. So in the past couple years, we have contributed the per pupil amount plus 2.5%, and that increases the per pupil amount for next year. So I'm not sure where that comment was
Okay.
coming from.
okay.
You know, I really think it would be nice if some attention was given to our state legislatures to, I understand the reasoning behind maintenance of effort to a degree, but I think our county, I think other counties may be more apt to contribute larger amounts if they weren't locked into that year after year. So I think maintenance of effort, unfortunately, artificially holds back what counties may otherwise feel comfortable to provide, because then we would be locked into that higher amount and we can't adjust. But our budget clearly fluctuates and adjusts from year to year.
It does, and I'm not sure exactly what the formula will be, but I do think I read in the Kerwin information that the maintenance of effort calculation as we know it today may go away in 2024. That's what I think I remember. There will be a different calculation, which, you know, all I've seen is the fiscal impact for the counties based on that, and that's as far as I am with
How
that.
would you get more information on it? Because I've also heard that it may be looked on a school-by-school basis rather than a per-student head, how many schools we have in our system.
Okay.
Is that what you've heard, or when will you find out more information on that?
I have to find time to dig into it a little bit more. I do have the bill that was passed upstairs, and that's where I got that 2024 date from, because as I was taking some time to review it, I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. So as I learn more, I will definitely keep the commissioners informed. And
Yeah, I think you are right. I mean, I've heard the same thing. I mean, Kerwin is gonna change the way all that's calculated.
right,
And I think it is 2024, I believe, when that ends.
yeah.
And I'd like to get a little more information on, you had mentioned, maintenance of effort has gone up 2.5% in past years. I'm
Yeah,
not-
so the county's subject to the escalator. So for instance, like for the 2020.
So when you say escalator, that's state mandate?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Right,
You're
and there's a couple different choices, but the 2.5% is what we've been.
It's the lesser of 3 factors, which I don't have memorized, but 2.5% seems to be what our county's been subject to.
Right.
Yeah.
So how does that escalator component factor into the statement with paying the same amount per student as we had a number of years ago?
I don't know. That's why I had some confusion with that statement, because only I guess if you're trying to factor in inflation or something like that, I'm really not sure. But, by our records, even if that's how you calculate the maintenance of effort, you take the per pupil amount that was provided for fiscal year 21 and you multiply it by the 2.5% escalator. So per pupil, you're adding 2.5%, and then you multiply that number by the number of pupils. So that's how the number went down, even though it's more per pupil. So. Next, you can see the library is we are proposing an increase of $79,550, which equals 2.5%. If you move to the next page, you'll see the category for law enforcement, which has a $1.4 million increase overall. If we look at the summer explanations, the judicial department increased mainly due to the STEP and the COLA. It was offset slightly by a decrease in health insurance based on employee selection. Process servers department increased by the STEP and COLA. Patrol increased mainly by the STEP and COLA costs of around $500,000, but operating costs also increased by $70,000, mainly due to increases in liability insurance and also the additional expense we heard about from the sheriff related to janitorial maintenance contract. In the past, inmates provided this service, but were no longer able to meet the need. There was also a one-time request for $72,000 for bulletproof vests, tasers, and a canine. Central booking increased due to the STEP and COLA. The detention center increased by $570,000. Wages and benefits represent $440,000 of that. A request for an attorney is included in that amount, and also a request for the building maintenance mechanic. These costs were offset by the elimination of 2 vacant correctional deputy positions. Operating costs increased by $143,000, which is the result of increases in the inmate medical and food contracts, and also a substantial increase in glove costs, and that's directly a result of COVID-19.
Is that reimbursable by?
Now that we have additional CARES funding, it may be. And we had a preliminary meeting to try to dive into that a little bit. But yes, I do think that safety supplies like that may be reimbursable.
Right, and as Sarah said, we did have a meeting about that yesterday to start to discuss funds we may be getting under the American Rescue.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a lot more discussions about that, and there'll be discussions with the board as to some of those things. So.
Mm-hmm. In addition to that, the narcotics task force increased by approximately $33,000, mainly due to the STEP. The budget does also include the purchase of night vision binoculars and a replacement vehicle. The police academy budget decreased. It's a fairly new budget, and estimates were put in place last year. These costs are offset by Academy revenues. Animal control increased by 2.5% for an amount of $35,000. And the sheriff auxiliary budget increased by $40,000, but this cost is also offset by revenues, so not an increase or impact to the budget. If you flip to the next page, we have emergency services, which overall increased by $4.1 million. Main changes related to this division is in special operations. Operating costs increased by $8,000, mainly due to auto repairs and gas monitoring. Capital outlay, though, increased by $67,000 for the purchase of a number of items. There's a raft, a trailer, and other PPE items. There's a request for a Gemini meter, which was approved to be funded from or recommended to be funded from the CIP fund. So if you see that $125,000, that's related to that meter. For Fire and Rescue Volunteer Association, the change is $1.4 million. $1 million of that was a transfer from EMS operations. So if you see a reduction in EMS operations, that's that $1 million. It's for reimbursement to the health insurance, to the EMS companies for health insurance. Other costs related to that increase include an increase for LoSAP benefits and the $100,000 for the third-party review of the county appropriations to the volunteer companies. In addition to that, medical fees increased by $55,000 due to costs related to cancer screenings. In the Department of 911, that department increased by $380,000, mainly due to the step and COLA, but also one additional emergency services communications specialist. Operating expenses increased by about $50,000 due to software increases. And capital outlay increased by $70,000, mainly due to an HVAC replacement and requests for carpeting.
We used to have a equipment replacement fund for our volunteer companies. Would that be under this category? What's the status of that?
An equipment replacement fund?
You mean the fleet replacement?
Well, for our companies to be able to borrow
Okay.
Oh, for them to borrow money?
against, so if they wanted to buy a piece of equipment, they had a fund there that they could
We
borrow.
still have that in place as a loan, right?
Yes.
Yes, we still do have that in place.
That's a revolving loan fund. That's still in
is.
place, right? I don't know
I can't
how much.
remember off the top of my head if it's $1 million or $1.5 million if they needed to utilize it, and
Okay, so that money's still there.
it is.
Okay. And then, okay, that's all I need now.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Other than that, on the next page, we have EMS operations, which decreased by the $200,000, but keep in mind that's related to the $1 million that was transferred. So in actuality, wages and benefits increased by $740,000. And that's mainly due to the 7 positions that were added to that department. Those positions were offset by the transfer of the deputy director. That deputy director is now housing their payroll in the fire operations department. And we already talked about the $1 million. Capital outlay increase for this department for AED units. And 1 LifePak monitor defibrillator was approved for or recommended for purchase through CIP. The next department for fire operations, this department increased by $2.3 million, mainly due to the cost of the additional firefighters. Other requests include the $167,000, but that's not just for overtime, that's for the overtime and the part-time wages that they were requesting, and also close to $160,000 for volunteer turnout gear. The amount that you see being transferred to CIP is for a trailer. Emergency management decreased slightly, mainly due to the transfer of certain expenditures in that department being moved to other emergency services departments. And you can see the Public Safety Training Center, an increase in new budget of $167,000. This is due for completion in the spring of 2022. Wages and benefits and operating costs are estimated at $135,000 for 1 quarter of the year. There is an additional request in here for capital outlay for $33,000 for a vehicle and a mower for the premises. Are there any questions on emergency services? Okay. The next page relates to operating transfers. The increase is in the amount of $1.1 million in total. Highway is an increase of about $211,000, which is mainly due to the step and COLA and to supplant the expected reduction in highway user revenue. Solid waste, you see a decrease of $46,000, just based on reduced need, and their tipping fees are up, so that's good news for them. The Cascade Town Center, you see on there for $163,000. This property is in the process of being sold. This budget does include $150,000 for the community center. The Ag Center increased by $30,000, mainly due to support that is required for the fund. Last year, or I guess rather in the fiscal year 21 budget, fund balance was used to balance the budget, but as you well know, we can't continue to use fund balance to balance a budget, and so that is the reason for that $30,000 increase to the general fund. Grant management increased by $76,000, mainly related to the step and COLA and a reduction in grant revenue. This is part of the impact that we see, and that we'll probably or may continue to see from the state level, reduced funding, which does impact us at the county. Land preservation reduced slightly just based on program funding. The utility admin fund, you can see there's an increase of $190,000 here in this fund. And this is mainly to provide for the stormwater management costs, which include the 2 positions that you heard about earlier related to meeting requirements from our NPDES permit. The water fund revenues are insufficient to cover expenditures, and this fund requires a general fund subsidy. This increased by almost $80,000. The transit fund increased by $340,000, mainly to provide for costs that are not being covered through grants or fees. They did have some reduction in fees, but also as time goes on, the grants are being held flat as they were last year, or they're actually being reduced. And so in those cases, the county has to step up and supplant those lost funds. And then the golf course increased slightly by $12,000, mainly due to the step and COLA. If you turn to the next page, we're on capital. You can see capital increased in total by $5.4 million. It was $5.9 million increase in the capital fund, but it was offset by a reduction in debt service. The debt service is just based on our amortization schedules. And the $5.9 million increase to capital is the restoration of capital funding into our budget. We flip to the next page. Courts in total, including circuit, orphans, and state's attorney, increased about $300,000, mainly related to wage and benefit costs for circuit court and approval of increasing the pay for the bailiffs to $100 per day. That was an item that was brought to you in the last 2 months, I believe. And then state's attorney increased by $176,000 roughly, also related to the step and COLA, but also due to the additional state's attorney position that was requested, which was offset slightly by the part-time budget that was reduced. For state operations, we have an increase of about $212,000. This increase is mainly related to the election board. There was a position for an IT specialist who was approved in the fiscal year 21 budget. However, the salary was only partially funded for that year, and so you'll see the full funding for that position reflected in the fiscal year 22 budget. Also, there was an increase in their lease payments of $62,000. That's related to state equipment that's mandated by the state. And also $40,000 request for equipment in capital outlay, and that's for shelving units, tables, and workbenches. Something to note is that there is current legislation, I don't know the bill number, I don't have it in front of me, but there is current legislation that could require the county to, I believe, have 3 early voting sites. And that could also impact this budget, and that may be a change that we end up seeing in the future. I think the early estimate that we have may be around $50,000 for those costs. If I'm right, I'm looking at Kim. I think it's about
I thought
$50,000.
the purpose, and I might be wrong, but I was thinking the purpose of the new facility was to
Have a place for early voting. One large place for early voting.
Wouldn't need the additional.
I do understand that, sir. And it,
I can share with you at one time when I was on the Board of Elections, the number of voting sites was determined by all the registered
Right.
voters that were in the county.
Yeah.
And I think threshold may have been 100,000, bumped up to an additional place that's needed. So that may be an extra.
Yeah.
unfortunately, if the state determines,
I understand,
right,
yeah, but I just thought,
right,
just my thought, my memory.
understood. The last section relates to all other general fund categories or departments that we have not yet reviewed. On a high level, wages and benefits, you can see that there's a $5 million increase for this category. However, remember that the $4 million that was contemplated before, or roughly $4 million, is included in this number. So wages and benefits increase related to the step and COLA. But there's 3.9 million, almost the 4, which is included in the general ops department for a one-time expenditure that the commissioners can allocate. Operational costs increase slightly, mainly due to software and utility costs. Also, the cost of the new election board has increased. The building costs for that have increased by $41,000 based on the square footage and the larger area. And also there was an increase in $20,000 for the Commission on Aging. And then in capital outlay, you can see an increase of $200,000, which is mainly related to backup storage to mitigate potential damage from ransomware, theft, and destruction of data centers. This may also be something that's included in the as a reimbursable item from the federal funds. And also there are a couple vehicle requests for IT, construction, and wireless communications, and they've been moved to the CIP column. And with that, I'd like to draw your attention to the 5-year plan. I did print out a larger one for you that should be at your desks. If your eyes go to the bottom of the plan, you can see that $3.9 million sitting there for additional, it says additional pension contribution, but I just put in pension because I felt like it was easier to look at one whole number rather than splitting it between capital and pension for now as we work through some of the details on the board's decision to allocate that funding. Keep in mind, this does include the disparity grant of $7.8 million, which we know we may be subject to a lower amount, which is $6.8 million, so that would take $1 million out of the funding that's available for a one-time use. I'd like to see if another thing before I move on is, this is our 5-year plan so far. So you can see in 2025 and 2026, we do have based on the assumptions that are used in this plan, we do have a deficit position. And so that's why I would stress again to not increase any operating costs. There could be things in this plan that change. And when you look 5 years out, $1 million related to the total budget that we have is not that high on a percentage basis. But we do need to still have a plan in place as we move forward. So I just want to make sure that you're aware of that. And also,
2025, the first year, we have to start paying the SAFER grant. We have
It
to start
is.
paying the full cost of all those new firefighters.
it is.
2025.
That's correct. Yes. And so I suppose at this time, if the board wants to discuss the one-time funding, or if they want to take the information that was provided to them today and have a discussion at a later date, we can do whatever the board desires. Okay. If there are no other questions for me, I thank you for your time, and I look forward to additional conversations related to the budget. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right,
Thanks, Sarah.
motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
First and second, any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you all very much. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you.